Jeremy, tell us a little bit about Azure Local and how AVD fits into that equation.
Azure Local allows you to extend your Azure presence locally. You can have your hardware that maybe already exists, and you can utilize that to deploy an AVD environment that you manage locally. But you're using the same portal, the same management plane to take care of all these devices. So, you have that familiarity with the tool already through the portal to bring up your environment, and you manage all the aspects of your Azure Local environment right there through the portal. And so you have complete and granular control with your hardware. And there is a slight cost to spin up your VMs. But again, these are not the same costs that you would have if you were spinning up that virtual machine in Azure itself.
Yeah, there's cost savings, and I think one of the places we landed on AVD for a lot of our smaller customers was they went full cloud on their endpoints, right? They're intra-ID joined, Intune managed. Most of their apps are SaaS apps, and the majority of employees just didn't need a connection to a data center or a set of servers anywhere. They could just run their laptop in a coffee shop, and they had access to everything they needed wherever they were, as long as they had internet access. But in a lot of the small business space, you still have one or two line of business apps that are legacy. They're running on a SQL server. They need to run on a Windows server with an IIS server. And you got an app server and a database server and a file share. And there's some of these legacy constructs. And, it's really interesting. Some of these industries, there's two or three pieces of software that run that specific part of that industry. And if you're going to be in that space, you're running one of those three. And the majority of them are very legacy software, right? They were written by companies in the space for their own use, and they sold it to other people. They're not designed from the ground up to be in the cloud. And so you have those server uses. And AVD fit a really good spot there where we could give people access to that app through AVD, whether through a remote app or through a full desktop experience. But I think this Azure Local development really opens a new door of that app may run on a local server, right? A lot of times some of those line of business apps need a lot of horsepower for like a SQL database, and that can be very expensive to run big SQL servers in Azure. There's just a lot of costs with the cores and the memory and the licensing. And sometimes you can buy a lot of server for 4 or 5 months of Azure usage for that SQL server buys you a very nice piece of hardware for your office. And so this Azure Local lets you say, great, I want that local server because that app needs to stay local. But all the benefits of Azure Virtual Desktop we talked about earlier, that security, that scalability, that brokered connection that's not just an open port, you get rid of all that complexity with AVD on Azure Local, but then your users are on a VM right next to the server. So they get that
Yes.
performance of being on premise. So definitely a really exciting development.